Welcome to our webinar here. Thank you all for joining us for the first webinar in our four-part The Managed Services Journey webinar series. This one is entitled, What Are Managed Services? I just want to welcome you to the webinar today, and I think you're going to get a lot out of the content that we've prepared for you. First, though, I just want to take a few minutes to introduce who's on the line with you today. So my name is Stephanie Baskerville, and I'm going to be your webinar host. I'm ProServeIT's content writer here, obviously at ProServeIT. There we go. And joining me today is Corey Reneker, VP of Alliances at ProServeIT, and Glenn Wilson, who's Global Director of Information Technology at Right to Play. I'm excited to have both of them on the line with me today, and they're going to be giving some great content around our main theme of what are managed services. Sorry, I guess I would say before we get started with the content, I would like to point out to you in the GoToWebinar platform, you're going to see a questions tab. If at any point during the webinar you have a question, please feel free to type it out into the questions tab window, and I'll be happy to read out those questions as they come in. We do want to make this experience as organic as possible and ensure that you get the most out of your time with us today. So please don't be shy. Use the questions tab as often as you need to, and Corey or Glenn or myself will be able to answer them for you. Probably not me though. So I just want to start off with the agenda for the webinar today. If you could just, there we go, perfect. So of course, we're going to be talking a little bit about what are managed services. We're going to be exploring some opportunities for managed services in your organization. And then we're also going to be introducing Glenn to talk a little bit more about his personal story or his company's personal story of using managed services. We will talk about some next steps, and then of course we'll get into the more formal questions and answers. Again, though, if you do have questions along the way, use the questions tab. So before all that gets started, we want to just start off with a short introduction into who we are. So very quickly, ProServeIT is a Microsoft Gold partner with a comprehensive focus on cloud transformation, managed services, software development, IT service desk, and technology and consulting. We do have three main differentiators that we like to focus on. So first and foremost, we are in the business of eliminating IT debt. And what we mean by that is that we want to make sure that you have the technology you need when you need it, and once you've purchased it, that you're getting the maximum ROI on your investment. Second of all, we do put a security lens on everything that we do. So we want to help you manage your advanced cybersecurity risks and secure your data, identity, and devices. We also implement this internally as well. So when you're a customer of ours, we're keeping your data safe too. And last, we are your full stack technology partner. So we're going to be with you from start to finish, helping you along every aspect of your digital transformation journey to the cloud, which of course includes managed services. So on the next slide here, you're going to see a few of our service offerings and technology that we work with. So again, cloud transformation, professional services, software development, infrastructure, change management, managed services, and IT roadmaps, which actually help you understand how to leverage IT as a critical business advantage and close the gap between your business needs and your IT capabilities. So that's going to do it for me now. With that, I'm going to pass things over to Corey and Glenn to begin talking about the meat and potatoes of managed services, so to speak. Again, if you have any questions, you can utilize that questions tab, and we'll make sure that your questions are answered as soon as possible.
Thank you, Steph, and welcome to all. Thank you for your time. We hope to make the best use of your time. We don't expect this to be long, but we want to ensure you're getting the maximum impact for the time you do spend with us. So again, thank you for being on the call, and thank you for your attention. When we talk about managed services, it's sort of a nebulous term that sort of, cloud, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different organizations, but the way that ProServeIT likes to sort of phrase what managed services are what's on the screen now. So if the offering is not providing these three things in those blue boxes, then it's not a managed service. We want to increase automation using tools and scripts and cloud and all the latest and greatest technology to decrease the amount of labor we have to put forward in order to execute services on your behalf. Or you obviously want to improve your efficiency and obviously decrease your costs. What managed services are not, which is crucial as well, is the traditional bat phone, where we let things degrade, services are offline, and we get a call when things are already bad. We want to get ahead of that, and the best analogy there is sort of a red light, yellow light, green light. Green light, everything is active, services are available, your users are able to function. Yellow light meaning we swoop in to fix things before they become red light, because red light means things are offline and your users can't function. So if we're doing our part in terms of the way that we provide managed services, we are largely in the background and your systems are operational and we are proactive. Proactive being the most optimal term there. How we provide this is across the globe. You see the map there, and the reason we do this is you need to have really strong resources operating within their time zones. Working the evening shift is extremely tough, so we provide the offerings here across Canada, Europe, and Vietnam in order to ensure that we're providing late night, weekend monitoring, overnight security patching, things of that nature to ensure that the users within your environments are not affected by the services we're offering. And it lets us provide people with a good work-life balance for our staff in terms of operating within their time zones to make sure that we're all working the best we can. On this particular slide, you'll focus on that middle row is where all the value is in terms of business impact. The bottom row is sort of the commodity management, 24/7 monitoring and user support, security, patching, tuning, fixing things, applications, databases, networking, all those things. But the middle row is where we try to really add as much value and impact to our customers as we possibly can to ensure that when you're adopting technology, as per what Stephanie said earlier, is you're taking advantage of as much of that as you can and using our experience out there to help shape and guide you within your business. So if there's other customers who have experiences and anecdotes that are going to allow you to grow and to learn from that, we're going to bring that to you through the virtual CIO program. We do document everything through a very rigorous knowledge base. We do provide roadmaps, and this is all free of cost. Analysis and budget forecasting to ensure that you're not buying shelfware, and then optimizing your spend. We see servers, applications, databases, middleware. There's so many ways that you can save. We want to pack in as much value here as we can so that as we're supporting your environment, we're also advising you to ensure that things are completely optimized and safe and secure. The ongoing knowledge base is a huge investment we made recently to ensure that, number one, we document everything about your environment while we support you, but two, it drives consistency. So as we solve a problem, fix a symptom, everybody on the team begins to learn how to do that. And so that next time, if it occurs again, we're executing the same efficient approach to solving the problem as we did the first time. So as the team grows and learns and gets to know the environment and gets stronger and stronger, this knowledge base becomes a massive asset for the team and for you, because this becomes a living, breathing artifact about your world. We spent a lot of time working on this to ensure we're good at it, and this is a way that we sort of differentiate the way that we would provide ongoing support for your environment versus your on-site team. So this eye chart is one that we're quite proud of, and it sort of is meant to depict a day in the life of an IT resource. You can see on the left, you've got security, backup DR, work-life balance, pace of IT and operations. And this is what we typically show that shows life before taking on proactive, ongoing managed services. You'll see you've got Timmy's soccer game there, you've got security, there's backup, you've got all this stuff you have to balance. And typically the first thing that goes is security patching, proactivity, ongoing support, weekend work, all the stuff that has to happen to keep things strong and secure. People just get really busy. So once you adopt proactive, ongoing support from ProServeIT, we like to think of this as a day in the life of after for your internal staff. This is a high-end, high-value career path that basically eliminates the taxes and lets people have a good work-life balance, a great career, add more impact to the business while not having to pay all those taxes for the ongoing support. So the goal is not to remove jobs, eliminate jobs, anything like that, the old school notion of outsourcing. The goal is to remove the functions of the role that we can add value in by being automated and being secure and being around the world so that people have a better life balance. And this is crucial because it's kind of eliminates the boogeyman factor. That gives me the chance now to introduce Glenn, who's on the call. Glenn, you want to say hi to the group, please?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Glenn. He's the Global Director of IT for Right to Play, and I'm going to turn things over to Glenn to discuss sort of his experience and their journey while providing, support for who they support, but also sort of how their journey has been going and how far along they are. So Glenn, I'll turn things over to you.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate it. So Right to Play, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with Right to Play as an organization. I'm sure you've seen some of the ads and oh, the guys with the soccer ball. And that's very true, but it's also just kind of scratches the surface of what Right to Play actually is as a global organization. And Right to Play was founded in 2000 by Johan Koss, who is an Olympic speed skater, originally from Norway and now a Canadian citizen. And he had done a lot of traveling in Africa and other areas and noticed that the children are obviously the most vulnerable of all the populations, and that with all of the strife and things that go on in the world tend to be, pardon me, tend to be the subset within society that pays the hardest price for that, and their childhoods are kind of taken from them, and they're marginalized in most of the instances. So what Johan found out through a lot of his interactions with many of these communities was that for children, that a huge part of learning happens through play. So as Right to Play came into being in 2000, it was very much focused on running programs for kids in areas of the world, trying to empower them to rise above some of the issues that they've seen within their countries and within Africa and the Middle East initially, and now in Asia as well. And really understood that play-based learning is something that can be transformational for communities at large, not just for the kids, but on all the aspects within a society that can help really drive change. Sometimes I think you have to look at it in some of the older generations are kind of a write-off when you're trying to make social change and bring equality and equity into a conversation. And by empowering children to actually go in and help affect change by staying in school, by looking at some of the social norms that are accepted by some of the older generations and looking to change that, we fund programs and education in schools in lots of different areas, refugee camps. We empower the kids to become trainers, to train the trainers to go in and start clubs and programs that can affect change and bring some happiness and joy. And essentially, Right to Play, that where that ball comes from is that when Johan was in, I believe it was Eritrea after the Civil War, and there was one child and amongst all of them playing around in these rusted out, bombed out tanks. And he was the most popular of all of them. And he asked him, why are you so popular? And he said, long sleeves. And Johan was like, what do you mean long sleeves? Well, I'm the only one with long sleeves. And he took his shirt off and rolled it up and tied it into a ball. And that became the soccer ball that all of the kids started to play with. And he could see the joy in their eyes. So he actually went back to Norway, and people called him insane, and started sending sports equipment. And he was told at that time that it was the first time that their communities had been treated as people with needs outside of, this is something that has to be done through a UN, mission, and treated more as objects than as actual people that have requirements outside of, food and shelter, that there are other aspects that are just as important. So what we've found in our journey through Right to Play is that communication is key, and having that ability to reach some of these locations, especially in Africa and the Middle East, where there are a lot of refugee camps, where there are problems with stable electricity, where bandwidth is very occasional at times, where they might have 3.5 hours of power a day, trying to bring teaching materials and to have conversations about people liaising and sharing information, trying to help with change was very difficult. And that we, as organizations grow and mature, everyone realizes that, You tend to look at your back end and the IT portions less and less as you're forcing and doing things in other areas. It's the least funded area. And we really found that being central and looking only as a headquarters staff, we wanted to harness those play processes by enabling sharing and enabling people to work in a cloud environment where we could have the people who are, feet on the street in Palestine, the West Bank, in some of the refugee camps in Burundi and Rwanda and China, for that matter, Thailand, to be able to actually give feedback that we can fine tune a lot of these programs and what's truly needed. Because a lot of the times what we see, or what the European offices see, is what a requirement is for a certain area is completely off in left field as to what the people on the street really actually need. So when we realized that we were running basically 23 disparate IT areas, people would have to remote desktop into the database where we have 7 terabytes of information. It was very, very, very difficult to share that information, to give them the transports that are required so that they can enable some of these changes and use some of the knowledge base that we have with volunteers and staff. And we're above 500 people now that are employed by Right to Play globally, and we're looking at almost 15,000 local volunteers and coaches working in 23 countries. So in 2017, Microsoft generously funded a grant for us to enable us to look at moving to the cloud. And originally it was going to be a rollout for D365, the Dynamics version for finance and HRIS, and looking at Office 365 and SharePoint Online. So in the mid part of 2017, we had a third-party provider that was doing our backups and that sort of thing, but we never really felt that we had a relationship with them where they were helping us to foster some of this change that we were trying to embark on. And they didn't have any experience dealing with European or developing countries and how we go about rolling out programs and what's the best way to come up with a roadmap. So we engaged with our friends at ProServe to look at SharePoint Online as using that as a portal for sharing information, as opposed to a RAID array in a Toronto office where we could engage people and have things in the cloud. And as things have progressed and we've rolled out Office 365 and SharePoint Online, we realized that there was a whole lot more that we needed to do, that this really wasn't reaching all the people that we really need to reach. And for that sharing of information, we needed to go a lot further than we had. So our contract came up with a third party that we had, and we started engaging with ProServe. And Corey and Dave Poley and several others were instrumental in bringing us into the fold. And it wasn't that global feel that you have from some of the service providers. It was very much a relationship built on understanding and communication, and for them to really get to know who we were as an organization and what our pain points were. And one of the issues that we run into is that in a not-for-profit, when we're trying to spend as many dollars as we can in the field, it doesn't leave a lot of room for our IT infrastructure or for our IT staffing. So we run a very, very lean team, which is frightening at times, but it serves us in that we at least can fund as many programs as possible. And in 2018, we embarked wholesale in with ProServe to help us come up with a roadmap. They have engaged us and helped shepherd us through this process, and actually went out and was able to get another grant for us to come up with a roadmap for how we would move into Azure, and looking at the different ways that we could implement different technologies in that would help us transform. And so basically in 2018, we went in with Dynamics for CRM. We were looking at global fundraising. We partnered with another company, Mission CRM, and their software to roll out an application that we could look at global fundraising and bring in all of the offices on one format and one database, all done in the cloud in an Azure environment, while at the same time rolling out Dynamics 365 for finance, moving away from SharePoint. or not SharePoint, pardon me, but Sage, so that we had that global reach for budgeting, that we could then look at all the grants that come in from Europe and North America, and having everyone have the same access and one source of truth for that data. At the same time, we were rolling out HRIS and Microsoft Talent and all those wonderful things, while doing SharePoint Online and a Teams integration that we could roll out globally. And as we rolled out Office 365 and the licenses therein, we were coming up with collaboration suites and how to program these things and roll them out in a tiered process so that all of the different countries could utilize some of these fantastic services that were then available at our fingertips. With that came this rollout to Azure and our server backend. We're also looking at dev results for a monitoring and evaluation application that tracks and reports on our international development and how many children that we've reached, the number of teachers, the programs that are run. And I guess one of the learnings that we've been discussing and have talked to Corey and Dave Poley at length, that one of the things you really need to consider as you roll out is you need to understand your user base. And as things become more collaborative, you receive a lot more feedback. All of it not that great sometimes, in that the deficiencies that you're running, because organizations, as everyone knows, as they grow, the maturity levels in for your processes tend to take a back seat, for your back-end infrastructure tend to take a back seat. And to really pull all of those things together, we needed to look at where everyone was on a user base from even understanding the technology. And it was very different around the globe, and even within our own country, that you think that we would be relatively tech savvy across the board, and the user base just simply isn't. So we've looked at LMS 365 and are rolling that out now to help with training across the organization as well, because it's a multi-pronged approach. It's great that you can open up technology and you can enable people to share, but if they don't know how to get to that information or how to create these teams that they can do on their phone, mobilely, or on a desktop or on a laptop, it's impossible to bring people into that fold unless they have that basic understanding of how things integrate and how things can work for them to reach out and be completely global in their aspects. So I hope that gives a basic overview of what we are and where we are and why we needed to look at a digital transformation. We're in the midst of it. We probably have another 12 to 14 months of rolling out all of these applications. And there are a lot of learnings on the way, and it would be impossible if it wasn't through the support of the third parties like ProServe, who help shepherd us through, who are there to talk us through some of these issues that we face and to look at different ways of integrating technology and how to phase it properly so that you can gain metrics as well, which for your rate of return and any ROI, that you can actually demonstrate some of the change that's happening globally throughout an organization.
That's great. Thanks, Glenn. As you were talking, we got a question in actually from Tony. You mentioned that you had a bad experience with another managed services provider in the past. Were there any things that you think we should be looking out for?
Definitely. You really want to understand what your technology is and where you're going with it. You want to spend the time on a roadmap with an organization like ProServe that can help you define what and how to move things and when. We had a catastrophic failure in January as we were moving from one service provider to ProServe. And it was very challenging that we thought we understood what our back-end apps were, and you really don't know until you do a very deep dive in. And there are times when I wish we had planned it just a little better as to what we can roll out and when, but things break, and when they break, you have to deal with it. And that's why it's so important to have those, spend that time, a couple months, really detailing with your third party what you're going to move and when, and what the benefit is for you and for them. And not really having the greatest plan going into it for what we could move, because there were a lot of unknown variables at the time. kind of hurt us. It was a real pain point, but ProServe was masterful in how they pulled us out of that issue that we were having and actually brought a RAID array into us that we could back up some of the data and helped us restore and move forward from that. And I would just recommend understanding your back end completely and what's required to move.
Awesome. Okay. Tony, if that didn't clear up the question or if you didn't answer the question, please just send a follow-up to us and we'll be happy to get a little more detail there, but that sounded great to me, Glenn. We do have another question for you as well. As a client, do you have any expectations as to the appearance of the managed services providers personnel when they visit your offices? So like, for example, would a branded shirt or a jacket or some other unique identifier be important to you?
For an organization to come in, we've asked that Dave Pauly is kind of at ProServe the standard bearer for ascots and things like that that denote who ProServe is when they come in. Of course, I'm joking. Not about the ascot, but there's no real rhyme or reason for us that people would have to be that way. It's we're a pretty casual organization, and when we do different areas, we like to have fun. We are pretty laid back in our approach, but everybody works really hard. We're all pulling towards the same thing. So we were looking for the same thing from our third party ProServe, and that when we have a relationship where we can joke and laugh and make fun of Dave Pauly because he deserves it, we really enjoy doing that. And
oh no.
He's kind of our punching bag for all things at ProServe, and I'm hoping that Dave is on this call, that we can, really bring Dave out to the fore, that you can meet Dave and see the ascots that he does use and his fashion sense.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. And do you have any guidance, before we wrap up here, do you have any guidance in regards to mobility, security, the order of operations? Like, you've been through a very long journey here. You're probably halfway through it. Is there any guidance to the people on the call in regards to the order of things and how mobility security has allowed you guys to do better work for the children?
Right. So the key form to that, and Corey, you've touched on it, is security and your transfer methods and the back end pieces and how you've configured them. Working with your third party is key, that you understand the services that they have and how you can then encapsulate your data so that you can share information, even on a cell phone, especially for the work that goes on in refugee camps. There's hardly any connectivity there, so it's a requirement to have something that they can pull off, whoever is there training and running education programs. And classifying your data, I think, is a big one. Understanding with all of the different forms of GDPR and privacy legislation that has now befallen certain areas, it's so key to protect that data. And I think going through all of the work of classifying what's required to be protected and what's kind of an open source where you share information, and giving people access to information for what they require and not access to everything that might not be required.
Okay, perfect. Exactly. I think that what we wanted to try to get across to the audience today, Glenn, was just how sophisticated some of this stuff is, even for any organization, SMB through enterprise, and just how many moving parts there are. And if anybody on the call is interested in next steps, the reason that we want to just have a conversation with you is there's a lot of things going on here. I think we can all learn a ton from how far Glenn has come. And if you want to have a chat with us, just email us please at cloud@proserveit.com. We'll come in, we'll have a conversation and see if managed services, Office 365, digital transformation, all these industry terms are a fit for you given where your business is and where you want your business to go. So I don't see any more questions on the board. So I think what I'll say is, on behalf of ProServeIT, I want to say thank you. And then I'm going to give the last word here to Steph.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Corey, and thank you very much, Glenn, for your stuff. This was some really good content here, actually, and I hope that it's given you guys a little bit more content as well. There is, just to remind you, again, this is the first webinar in our 4-part webinar series. And basically, so I just want to make sure that you're aware that you're certainly welcome to join us for the other 3 parts. This is kind of the managed services journey that we want to talk about. So we are going to be covering sort of everything that you need to know about managed services from start to finish. If you are interested in signing up for any of our additional webinars, we are going to be sending the links in our follow-up email to you in just a few days. And you can feel free to sign up for the other webinars in the series if you haven't already. If you can't make any of those webinars on the actual day of, please don't worry about that, because we will be sending you a recording of the webinar to watch at your convenience. So you don't actually have to be physically present. If you do have any questions on the topics that we'll be talking about, you can actually send them to cloud@ProServeIT ahead of time, and we'll make sure that we ask those questions on your behalf during the webinar as well. Just briefly, our second webinar on October 1st, we'll be talking about what you need to know around signing a managed services agreement, including brief demos of leading edge tools that will help your organization stay up to date with the latest patches and security. Our third webinar on October 15th will be geared towards your IT departments, and it will help them, similar to what Corey was talking about a little bit earlier. We're not saying that we will be taking over your IT department. It's more about an integration between our managed services capabilities and your departments, and what we can do to sort of augment what your IT people are already doing. So we'll be talking about that in the third webinar there. Again, that's on October 15th. We are welcoming you to invite your IT departments to attend that webinar. And our fourth webinar is talking about the next steps after you've signed that managed services agreement. So, thinking about sort of what the ongoing continuous managed services support would look like, understanding, that monthly, quarterly managed services reporting, much more than that as well, but different things like that. We'll also get into a couple roles of people that you might be engaging with in the future as well. So that webinar will be on October 29th, and that will wrap up the series. So again, the links for those webinars will be sent to you in the follow-up email that we'll be providing, and each webinar will be held at our usual time of 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know this one was a little bit different. It was held at 1, but the others will be held at 2 p.m. So I'm just going to hang on the line for a couple more seconds here and just see if there were any additional questions. Actually, there is an additional question here. Another question for Glenn. How have things changed since you've signed that agreement with ProServeIT?
Good question. So some of the changes that we've had, that we now have metrics into our antivirus that we've never had before. We have the ability to look at tickets that for our support, especially for our European operations and our West Coast operations. And people from Africa can call in when they have an issue trying to connect. Previously, we were limited to the Toronto hours, which really doesn't work globally. And the fact that ProServe has a global presence has made a significant impact in that people can actually dial into a number and have that support ready at their fingertips when it's required. Also, having a sounding board with ProServe for all the different divergent applications that we're trying to implement is key. When you run a really lean staff in IT, we really don't have the expertise in all the different areas. That we're a very, very sharp team that we have at ProServe, but we just can't cover all of those applications and be experts in them. So being able to utilize the pool of people within ProServe and have them within an email, a call, they'll come down, they'll work with you to come up with solutions. That's the biggest piece for me, is that when we're trying to look at how we roll out and if we run into issues with how we're rolling out, you have that expertise at ProServe with a third party that can give you a different perspective or other ways that you might not have thought of. So it's essentially like having a SME in your back pocket for something that you're probably not the best at or have that expertise in-house. It's certainly key to the success that we've had thus far, is utilizing that pool of the knowledge base that is resident within ProServe.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Glenn. So I'm not seeing any other questions coming in at this time. So I think that's going to do it for us here today. It looks like we're going to be able to give you about 20 minutes of your day back. If you do have any other questions, though, please feel free to email us at cloud@proserveit.com, and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions as they come in. Again, though, if you are interested in exploring managed services, as Corey was talking about, give us a shout at cloud@proserveit.com, and we'll get started with that as well. On behalf of Corey, Glenn, and myself, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us today, and we are looking forward to seeing you on the line in our other webinars coming up. So again, keep an eye out for that follow-up email. It'll be in the next day or two, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week as well. So take care, and we'll talk to you soon.